It's Wizards versus Lesbians, a podcast for your ears. Hello, and welcome to Wizards versus Lesbians. My name is Isaac.
I'm Alexis.
And today we're discussing Daughters of Chaos by Jen Fox.
We sure are.
Yeah. Would you like to do the plot, or shall I?
The plot. Okay, so Sylvie Swift is a young Southern girl in the years leading up to the Civil War. And her mother dies, and then her sister disappears under mysterious circumstances. And then eventually she follows, trying to find her sister, only to instead find a secret Southern prostitute goddess chaos cult.
Yes.
She, of course, joins.
Southern prostitute chaos goddess worshipping cult.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I mean that's, and then she goes off to California with her girlfriend.
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah.
And that's not actually a spoiler because it opens with her girlfriend dying in California of cancer.
Yeah. So yeah. No, that those are the bones of the plot.
Also, there are indeed tentacles. As we were promised tentacles, we were given tentacles.
I don't want these tentacles. So
are there wizards? Absolutely.
Yeah, there are wizards and there are lesbians.
Are there lesbians? Absolutely.
Yes, there are. This is Wizards versus Lesbians.
I mean, do they fight? Sort of. No, because really the wizards are the lesbians.
They're all on the same team on this one.
And this is a fairly pro-wizard book, so long as the wizards are women.
Yes. Why should you read this book?
Well, if you like go back and reread all the old Sandman comics, and you go, I want this to be radical feminist and also set during the Civil War, then this might be and also prose fiction, then this might be the book for you.
Yeah, and even more racist than the Sandman.
Also, yes. Yes. But also, if, you think you look at history and you go, but really weren't both sides of the Civil War wrong because they were men and it was violent, then this is definitely the book for you. Yeah. Also, honestly, if you're the sort of person who's really into literary fiction and likes to read literary speculative fiction so that you can go, well, speculative fiction doesn't make any sense, and continue to look down on it as a genre, then again, this is the book for you. You can enjoy this very much. This reads very much like a graduate of a writer's workshop prose. So, you can get that and also have the sense of confusion that you will expect to have reading speculative fiction. That's my pitch for the book.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you so far. I would say, it is possible to do a counter reading of this book. And in fact, the book invites you to do that. It actually sort of starts with hey, we know the author is dead. We're doing metafiction here, which is in some ways an excuse for all of the various ahistorical nonsense that is about to ensue. But it is possible.
Ahistoricity is not the problem here.
It's not, but it's certainly one of the factors. And you can do a counter reading of this book where it's about the effects of generational tertiary syphilis.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. So if you want to there is a Southern Gothic novel where you're in a very close first person on a person who, along with the rest of their family, has been mentally ill since birth in here.
Yes.
I wanted to stress that that's still a bad book. Even if you read it that way, but it does offer the exercise of counter reading, which can be fun.
And I will say for this book, that if you like to analyze stuff if you really like to pick apart and analyze literature and you don't actually need it to hold together as literature, then you can have a lot of fun with this one.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. I mean, we'll do our best to unpack some of it over the course of this episode. But But to move on to why you shouldn't read it, this is awful. Like, this is real bad. Like,
On so many different levels. Like, the prose isn't very good. The dialogue isn't very good. The characterization isn't very good. It does not hold together as, like, any sort of coherent plot. Most of the metafiction fails utterly. And is really annoying. And the politics are abhorrent on multiple levels.
yes. And you have the infuriating thing where the book also offers but I'm doing it on purpose wink for most of those.
Yes, but no, it is, and great. She's doing it on purpose. But, like, you can do something on purpose and still do it badly.
Yeah, no. I mean, that is exactly right. But it's like, for all the criticism that we're about to make, somebody who's pro this book could be like, oh, but didn't you notice that they're doing it for this reason and this reason? I'm like, yes, I did notice that.
I just still expect my books to hold together as, like...
The nature of the project itself is corrupt. I mean, you know.
Basically.
And so I don't care what kind of tricks that you're using to forward it. And shout out to Kelly Link for the glowing cover blurb, incidentally.
Yeah.
I would not have co-signed this. I would not have touched this with a 10-foot fucking pole, but you do you, Kelly.
I will note also, Saya, who I believe has recommended stuff for us before, and maybe we should actually just strike the recommender's name from the record, because we're going to be kind of mean to the book that has been recommended. But this was mentioned as weird small press shit. And I gotta say, I mean, Abrams is not Big Five, but Overlook is an imprint of Abrams, and Abrams is a fairly large boutique. You know, this is not Ilva or Bella or even Small Beer Press.
This reads sort of on a surface level like weird small press shit, but it's got too much going on under the surface. There's too much academic, like, as you said, literary salon shit going on. And
no, this is very much one of those. This is very much one of those small imprints of a much larger press that exists largely to help MFAs get a tenure.
Yeah, it's AstroTurf in that sense. And I would just also like to add that it also has a starred Publishers Weekly review, which you don't get if you're from an actual small press.
Well, you might. That's not entirely true. Like, Living Corrido is quite small, and they get starred Publishers Weekly and Kirkus reviews. And and Small Beer probably. So you can, but generally when we talk about weird small press stuff, we are talking about the stuff that's smaller and weirder and not an imprint of something larger or, backed by a fair amount of literary cred. But you know what? Honestly, if you can find other weird literary imprint stuff, I'll still read it.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is I'm glad that you recommended it to us, because this was
an experience.
It was an experience, and we enjoy experiences, and I'm going to enjoy talking about this.
I would much rather read this than be bored.
Yes, I wasn't bored. No. I hasten to point out that I actually was bored, because even with this in the middle, like about 2/3 of the way in, it still manages to fuck up and the pacing and get tedious, even with the welter of insane shit that's still happening. So
I would actually say that I was the middle third for me was the most boring. Anyway, let's go to the spoiler zone and start to unpack some of this baggage.
Oh, but there's content warnings, Alexa.
Oh my god, I forgot about the content warnings. Oh boy, are there content warnings. Both sides in the Civil War.
Yeah, that's a big one. And various other conflicts of your choice. Just like completely
there's body horror, there's a whole lot of venereal disease, there's a fair amount of referenced sexual abuse, including of children. There's some violence.
Yeah, it's our very standard, like, horrific things happen to everybody who isn't our main character, who escapes essentially completely scot-free.
Basically nothing bad ever happens to our main character, except by proxy when she suffers losses of people that she cares about, and even then it's surprisingly emotionless.
But people die in horrific ways just off screen.
Yes, and as somebody who is not a sex worker and does not is not even, like, engaged enough in that community and discourse to know. But I gotta say that the way that this book talks about sex workers is really weird. And every single sex worker in this book has a horrible, traumatic past.
I think this book essentially would piss off people on both sides of that particular conversation. I mean,
that seems highly likely.
Which is admirable in a kind of a strange way, I guess. I can't imagine anybody reading this book and not being pissed off, except Kelly Link, apparently, and whoever did the fucking starred review. But yes, having said that, and I don't think that's even scratching the surface, but you've got the idea. Let's go into the spoiler zone.
All right.
Off to the spoiler zone. We're off to the spoiler zone. Come to the spoiler zone with us. We'll talk about this mess, 'cause it made us both depressed. So come to the spoiler zone with us. So let me list let me list some things that are wrong with this book. And
then I'll chime in, because I actually made notes on this one, which I never do because I read over Shabbos when I'm not writing things down. But I went back and skimmed it just so to write a list of all the things that I was mad about.
Right.
And then I got bored doing that and stopped.
So
there were too many.
All the characters speak in the same, or like 80 to 90% of the characters speak in the same voice.
What? No! Isaac, you can't tell the main character is speaking? You absolutely can, because she says "my stars" like every third word.
Yes.
And no one else does that.
Actually, one person does, but
but not nearly as often. Like, yes. Nobody says "my stars" nearly as often as Sylvie.
Yes, "my stars" is on the list.
Yeah, it's on the list for me too.
But all of the incidental characters all speak in this extremely sort of high-flown poetic way with these complete sentences. There's no attempt to do period appropriate dialogue outside of "my stars," and the reason, I think,
and it's true, like everybody talks the exact same, and I had a lot of trouble keeping track of characters because there's no distinctive voices.
Yeah. When like people who are like really in the crowd and are there to be like, as you said, like fucked up sex workers with a tragic past, they kind of talk like poor people, but that's it. And the reason for this is that all of the secondary characters in this are meant to be a Greek chorus.
Yeah.
Because this is meant to be the whole conceit of this book is that our main character is translating a play called The Apocrypha, which is meant to be a lost comedy of Aristophanes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's basically Lysistrata, but pro sex work.
It's not even really pro sex work. It's pro women pretending to be sex workers to use their feminine wiles for political ends, which is also pretty much the rest of the book's position.
It's Lysistrata, but like radically feminist with goddess worship and pro sex work.
Yes, exactly. Just doing a radical translation of the source material in the way that, like,
she's not translating the source material, she's translating a French translation of the source material, and
right,
she doesn't even know French.
Yes. It's magic, she's doing it magically.
Yes, magically you can just sit down with a dictionary and no knowledge of a language and absolutely translate
Well, I'll tell you, this book really, really believes in postmodern literary theory. I mean,
that's true.
It's like, it's the text. It doesn't matter. It's her own, like, I mean, what she's trying to do is that she's doing an Antigone in the same way that, oh God, what's her name? The woman who did the really, really good Antigone.
Anne Carson?
Yeah, Anne Carson. She's doing Antigone like an Anne Carson Antigone kind of a thing.
No. Anne Carson's Antigone is identifiably Antigone.
Yeah. I'm saying the author is trying to do that. Jen Fox is trying to do that, but with a made-up play.
Yeah, right. The problem is it's with a made-up play.
Right, because you can't get this thematic content into anything that actually comes from that era because it doesn't exist there. Because this is all extremist, fascist nonsense that was invented in the 20th century that she's trying to put back into the, to make it as ancient as the mostly also made up goddess worship that she's talking about. And so it's all part of the same sort of like, extremist fascist project to project the blood and soil roots into the thing that don't actually exist. And but that's why the characters talk like that. If I were to say,
yes,
none of your characters talk like real people and none of them talk like people from this age, and they make references that don't make sense contemporaneously, she would be like, well, it's for this reason. And okay, it still sucks.
But the thing is, look, I actually really like a Greek chorus as a literary device. But for one thing, you have to have other characters, right? I mean, even if you have the Greek chorus acting as a Greek chorus, you still don't have just the one character. You have to have character interactions, and this doesn't have that because it only has the one character. And also, she still speaks very similarly to our so-called Greek chorus.
Yeah, no, strangely, actually, the play within a play, the Apocrypha itself, is better written than this novel.
Yes. It's not very good, though.
It's still not very good, but it does actually have distinct character voices in it.
Yeah, that's true.
So there is that. There's many instances in which like the author is making decisions that make the book worse when she knows, Yeah. It's like, you could be doing things that aren't this, but you're choosing to do this to make a point, and it's just making it worse.
Yeah. This book is incredibly constructed, and
I should also say that she's not Anne Carson. She does not have the ability to be an Anne Carson.
I was actually not even going to mention Anne Carson in this podcast because I did not think that it was worth a comparison.
Fair enough. I might just edit that out then if you think it's a bad...
No, it's fine. It's fine. I just really, really like that translation of Antigone.
It's great.
And
we recommend that.
Highly recommended. I mean, Antigone is also just a really good play. I mean, okay, so also part of this is that I like Sophocles better than I like Aristophanes. So, like, this is just my own personal bias coming into this. I didn't particularly like The Clouds or Lysistrata. But...
All right. Well,
So yes, also have better taste in Greek plays.
So Aristophanes catching strays here.
I know, sorry. Anyway, but like, okay, so the thing is that, well, she actually does, as you point out, the characters in the fake Greek play, Apocrypha, which is, sorry, Too Precious. The main character's name is Apocrypha, you see. But so it's clear that she can do these distinct voices, like, and it actually does capture the read of like one of the old, not very good translations, but of Aristophanes. But the problem is that it's still, even though the voice is accurate, what happens in the play is so play inside the book is so nonsensical that it ends up again throwing me out of the narrative. Because, yes. And I understand that a lot of the things she's doing are consciously artificial to draw our attention to like all the various literary tricks she's employing. But at the same time, if I read this and I go, I cannot believe anybody anybody could pretend this is a Greek play. That is a suspension of disbelief too far. I am totally with you on the underground tentacle monster sister goddess thing, but that this is supposed to be an actual Greek play, no.
Yeah, and like I don't believe that this is an actual like Civil War era letter that her evil brother is writing, and so on and so on. Although he turns out not to be an evil brother.
Excuse me, he joined the Confederacy.
Then again, he just completely gives away a bunch of Confederate military secrets to his non-aligned sister, uncensored and in the clear. Maybe he's a double agent. He turns out not to be an evil brother in the sense that I thought he was going to be the evil brother.
Yes. Yeah, no. You sort of expect him to, turn on her. And this is actually one of the real disappointments of the book is that nothing really happens with Silas. Like, he he's an arsonist. He kills their father and a bunch of other people by setting fires. He runs off to join the Confederacy. And so you would expect that, they're going to have to like reconfront each other, right? Because, this book is really into binaries, and he's masculine, he's fire, he's war, and she's feminine, she's water, she's sex. And life and a womb. And no, he just drowns in a failed Confederate submarine. And I mean, I do love that she worked the failed Confederate submarine project, because it's a great piece of dumb history. But like, it actually, she was doing something that was set up quite nicely, and then she completely just drops it.
What I thought, and I told you this at the time, what I thought is that we were setting him up to be Erostratus, who is the dude who burned down the Artemisia.
Right.
And no, and I'll tell you the reason that I think that it didn't turn out that way, and that he was sort of dropped, is because that would require somebody to be mad at Sylvie. That would require Sylvie to have to do something hard. Yeah. It's another one of our, like, going back to the Book Eaters, it's another one of our protagonists who must, like, never have to make a hard decision, never have to really get in trouble, even though she is an accessory to murder many times over, and does all kinds of basically horrific crimes. Like, even like the guy who she's a double agent for falls in love with her, and lets her off and forgives her for everything. She even has to volunteer for the riverboat trip.
Yes.
So, like, nobody's ever mad at Sylvie. Nothing bad ever happens to Sylvie, and that means that her...
Except when she loses people that she loves, which happens, like, a few times.
Right.
And one of those times, she gets her sister back.
And even when her daughters are taken away, and by the way, it's never explained why that happened, or how.
They're not even taken away. Like, she adopts them out because for reasons unspecified.
Yeah, but she acts as though it's like they've been torn from her, because it's like there's this enormous feeling of injury and, like, struggle against an evil world, when in fact nothing bad happens to her.
Well, that is no wonder she takes it so awfully that her, feels like her children are torn from her. That's the one time where she actually has to make a hard choice.
Right, exactly. But in the end, she gets them back voluntarily and coincidentally, and, like, because she's a famous writer and translator. Her talent and skill is enough to bring her children back, and she's going to inculcate them into this whole ideology that she has. And shall we talk about the ideology that she has a little bit?
Yes, let's talk about the radical feminist goddess worship pro-chaos ideology.
Yeah, so she's a follower of chaos, who is a titan, the Greek chaos. There's a lot of talk about, the all goddess, and, like, in various parts in the book, people just get together to name all of the names of the goddesses. One thing these books all have in common is they love to make lists of famous women and also goddesses. This book does both. I can do this too. For example, Ida Tarbell and Neith and Ukua and Nut and Mawu and Hypatia and Betsy Ross and Margaret Thatcher, Emily Bronte, Hatshepsut and Lady Godiva and Sally Ride and Mawu and Julia Child and Emily Post and Ishtar and Inanna and Joan of Arc and Diana. And what about Persephone? The point I'm trying to make is that it just becomes noise. It flattens them all out into people who were real and not, as if the idea's more important than the person.
And thus you get a rundown of a bunch of world mythology. But let's all be clear, the real one is the Greek one.
Yes, and also it's not all world mythology. It's from Sumer to America. We're not talking about any Asian gods. We're not talking about any African gods. It's Western civilization that the mother goddess can be found in. She's not interested in anything else, despite the fact that she is somehow the most well-read, like, penniless teenage girl in Tennessee, or or Kentucky as she is when she grows up, because she has this huge, wondrous library.
Yes.
She's reading, oh God, what was the one that was the most ridiculous that she had? Rambo. She's reading Rambo, in Kentucky as the penniless son of a disowned mill owner's son. And but yes, no, much is made of chaos and her deep cleft. There's a lot of talk about her void and all of the various things that might be found down in her deep cavernous cleft, her chthonic depths.
Yes, there's a lot of going, underwater. There's a lot of going down into caves. There's a lot of underground rivers. There's, again, the submarine.
If you just turn this 90 degrees, it could be Dave Sim going crazy in Cerebus. It's right. Exactly the same shit. Dave Sim was a comic author who wrote a Conan the Barbarian parody called Cerebus, the Aardvark, and it got weird. And at first it was good the way it got weird. It was some interesting storytelling, and he kind of pioneered self-publishing in the comics industry. But then he had some sort of breakdown and started accusing women of being like black voids that existed to steal men creativity, like they were the incarnations of the demiurge. And he wrote all this down in the middle of his comic book in like tiny little print, like the ravings of a schizophrenic madman. And then he kind of got better, but he was still a misogynist.
And this is very much 90s gender politics. Like, reading this was an interesting throwback to like wandering through the shelves of the lesbian feminist bookstore 2 blocks from my dad's house and just like flipping through the books and reading about goddesses.
Yeah. No, we're going to have to tap the Ursula Le Guin sign again, where it's like women's magic, And I'll actually put the whole text of that quote in a jingle here.
You absolutely should, because in particular, this really is like exactly what Le Guin was complaining about. Yes. Like with the darkness and the everything.
Yeah, no, it's really just textbook. Here's the sign that we tap. But I didn't and still don't like making a cult of women's knowledge, preening ourselves on knowing things men don't know. Women's deep irrational wisdom, women's instinctive knowledge of nature, and so on. All that all too often merely reinforces the masculinist idea of women as primitive and inferior. Women's knowledge is elementary, primitive, always down below at the dark roots, while men get to cultivate and own the flowers and crops that come into the light. But why should women keep talking baby talk while men get to grow up? Why should women feel blindly while men get to think?
That's another reason why you should read this book, is if you really liked Marion Zimmer Bradley's like Arthurian stuff, you'll probably enjoy this.
Oh boy. I said this to you, but I'm really glad that we read the Marion Zimmer Bradley books that we did, because it gave me some context, It helped, it gave me a place to stand when I was looking at these feminist cults. Because I was like, oh, okay, this is the tradition. We're going further back into that tradition next episode.
Yeah.
But, it led me to understand a lot of the ideology behind this. And incidentally, the way that she describes her underage relatives, her nephews and daughters, is very sensual in this book. I don't know if that's a coincidence or not, but a lot is said about the physical beauty of children in here. But anyway, so the secret history of the entire world is just the struggle of the god Chaos with
goddess
herself.
Chaos.
Goddess. I beg your pardon. With the goddess Chaos against herself, basically, because she's like, I want to end the world, but I'm kind of scared to, and like I'm struggling to recount this because it doesn't make sense.
No.
And when at any point where you can say, oh, this doesn't make sense, you're like, yeah, it's chaos. It doesn't make sense. It's not supposed to make sense. The feminine principle is not making sense. It's chaos. We can't talk about this because it's, unknowable feminine mysteries. And I was like, logic is not male. Logic is not the province of the man.
Magic is not gendered. Neither is chaos.
But regardless, the entire world has been formed by and is like interpreted by this gender relation. And chaos doesn't hate war; she hates civil war particularly. She really loves defending your family. And incidentally, even though you might deplore slavery, as she mentions a couple of times over the course of working for the Confederacy, she
to be fair, she's more working against the Union than for the Confederacy, and that's a totally valuable distinction. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, that's totally how war works.
Right?
But war is okay as long as you're defending the hearth. It's civil war that's the crime specifically, and that's when all of this stuff comes up, and the goddess chaos acts. And it's important to note that that this is what the Civil War was about. This specific thing. It was brother fighting against brother for political reasons. And one of the ways that you can tell this is that she goes out of her way over the course of this book to never specify the race of any human being.
Except that, some people are blonde or redheaded or things like that.
Oh, some people have the skin tone of a hang on, I want to make this reference specific. Some people have an amber skin tone. Some people have a tawny skin tone. Some people have the skin tone of a blood bay horse. And that one turns into a horse, incidentally, which is really nice. Let's just go all the way here,
Yeah, but that is possibly the least realistic thing in this incredibly unrealistic book, is that this white girl who has, in like occupied Confederate territory, Union occupied Confederate territory, like does not notice people's races, and there's no signage, and there's no, like obviously this is pre-Jim Crow laws, so there wouldn't necessarily be, whites and colored signage on everything, but there would certainly be the places where you'd get lynched if you walked in, and those don't seem to exist in this particular town.
No, absolutely.
Or in the town that she grew up in, which is,
rural Kentucky, Tennessee. Nobody's saying any slurs. Nobody's, acting weird about people's race. Like, it's all about...
She's not even noticing race. Like, in a society where people get really obsessive about, what percentage you might be, and where your entire life path is determined partly on what race you're perceived to have, and she doesn't notice it.
Yeah, no, she makes a great deal of fuss about how the Union Army is making emancipated people, who are just emancipated people, work on their fort the Union has re-enslaved these people, and which makes them just as bad as the Confederates. This is historically accurate, incidentally. I'm not going to pretend it's not, but it's a matter of
there's a matter of
scale.
degree.
Yeah.
I mean, that is part of the thing, is that you can write a novel where the Union doesn't come off super great.
Of course. Everybody was a monster at this point in time, as usual. But
yeah, I mean, like there's no such thing as a perfectly virtuous side in any war. That is true. Like, yes, atrocities happen in war, but there's still fundamental politics underlying these wars, and you can't just go, well, both sides did bad things, so the political causes that have brought us to this point don't matter.
Yeah. And incidentally, the book isn't anti-war. It's like, the Quakers, who is the non-magical side of her family, are the capitalist mill owner snobs who, disown their son because of his relationship with this actress, which means prostitute. And they're also incredibly rich because they offer their own son $3,000 in 1840 money to not marry this woman. So, they're the pacifists, bourgeois. It's it's specifically the civil wars that are the problem again. And it's specifically this Civil War, really.
Yeah, I mean, so incidentally, there's an interesting thing here going on with because, every generation, her mother was this actress who enchanted her father, and she also And like, there's this strong implication that the sexual hold that, you know, that Sylvie and her mother have over men is magical in nature. Like,
yes.
It's explicitly magical in Sylvie's case. She starts glowing and her clothing falls off in two neat halves. And then the following day, the Confederate, or not Confederate, the Union guy that she sleeps with is, changes his mind about what he's, releases all the arrested sex workers. And there's some consent issues going on here.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, it's one of those books where it's like men are inherently monstrous rapists, and so it's really not much for
and thus cannot be raped.
Manipulate them. Exactly. That's almost just baseline ideology for this kind of person.
Yeah, I know. It's just, but like, it actually gets pretty blatant. Because you start off and you're like, oh, okay, this is this, tragic, very sweet romance. And the fact that her father is left completely broken by this to the point of neglecting his children so that they almost die, and one of them becomes an arsonist, and another one becomes a literal tentacle monster. This is all a real tragedy of this failed romance. But then you realize, no, he's like, if this magical mind-controlling men with the power of glowing sex runs in the family, and so I'm not convinced that her not very good father and that this pretty terrible Union guy aren't themselves rape victims.
No, the Quakers were right. She did ensnare him. That's part of the point of all of this radical feminist stuff, is that it takes all of these cultural tropes at face value and assumes that they're correct. But then has to justify the ones that are misogynist. And it's not just, incidentally, that the men were raped. They were asking for it, and they like it. Because lest we forget the spectacular underground femdom fantasy scene.
Yeah, which has no connection to anything else in the book. Like, it comes out of nowhere, and then there's zero, it comes out of nowhere, and she sees, like, Andrew Johnson and all these Union guys getting whipped by the underground femdom cult. But then, like, this doesn't change any of their politics. For a book that's supposed to be about how, like, women's control over their own sexuality is the primordial magic that will, solve the world's problems. But it doesn't. It literally doesn't have any impact at all.
No, it does. But you see, it's because women's power is patience, you see. It's because, it might look like they're doing nothing, but it's because women, being the wiser, are biding their time for the real revolution, which will happen later. So, it is in fact the exact fascist genocidal principle that your opponents have to be simultaneously controlling everything and incredibly weak and inferior.
Yes. But in this case, it's like all men except for the one. Except for Doc,
your brother.
The immortal. No, because the brother's an arsonist. He kills people, and he's a Confederate.
Sylvie forgives him for all that. The one decent man, and by the way, the one decent black man in the book also just happens to be an ancient Egyptian.
Yes. Okay. They're in Kentucky. Why did he join the Confederacy?
Because he wanted to.
It's not like they're... Exactly! Because he wanted to. He had a real choice of armies to join.
Yeah, no, but Sylvie forgives him for that. And for all the other horrible shit that he did, like hiding the letters from her and all of that, and killing their dad. No, he's obviously an awful human being, but I'm just saying that, as we pointed out earlier, the book doesn't want to hold him to that, so, because he's family. Right.
And also because, if you actually hold Confederate ideology to, any standards whatsoever, then this book also doesn't work because it really wants the Union to be the bad guys because they're the ones who put all the sex workers on the boat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Meanwhile, victory will happen through inaction. The South will rise again. She's biding her time by going over to and living in a mansion in California that was seized from Hispanic people by law.
I mean, To be fair, a lot of Confederates did go and settle California.
Yeah. No, this is all historically accurate.
Right. This is another thing I wrote down. This is such a Wikipedia understanding of history, right?
And there's the Kelly Link connection.
Where, like, it has all these cool factoids and interesting details, but there's, it's not actually trying to... It's very self-consciously neutral, which works great for a crowdsourced encyclopedia, but not for a novel.
Right. And, it also means that we're not actually thinking about this in terms of, a historical life. It's not even like a people's history kind of thing because, none of the details are correct. There are no people. And, like, you're throwing a red and white inflatable life preserver to this woman in 1840, and who fell off the whore barge. I mean, in this silence, I reckon with having said the phrase whore barge. It's one of those things where once you start cracking it open, it's like there's so many things that don't make any sense that, one is forced to accept it as a kind of fever dream, which is where I come back to the syphilis thing, because she does keep mentioning syphilis.
Syphilis really in some ways is the main character of this book.
Right, and the reason for that is because she's citing all of these contemporary accounts, because this is based on a real incident where the Union tried to
stick all the sex workers on a riverboat, and then it just ran up and down the river. Right, again,
because nobody would take them in. I mean, which is again
much like the terrible Confederate submarine project. This is there's a lot of very interesting little historical and details in here.
Right, but the point being that actually I don't remember the point that I was trying to make. What was I talking about?
Syphilis.
Oh yeah, thank you. Of course. But the point is that the reason that they were expelled is because they were giving all of the troops VD, which is a problem as old as armies.
Yes.
And a novel modern solution to put them on the river and send them upriver in hopes that somebody else will want a barge full of syphilitic prostitutes. But incidentally, I'm using the same language that the book uses. We're not so far out of contemporary language that she would say sex workers.
Right. The book mostly says whores.
Yes, indeed. Sisters, priestesses, whores. We're all the same. They're all the same. And in fact, women are all the same. All women are priestesses and whores. And, I'm pretty sure that's not true. Can I just say that?
I'm pretty sure that's not true.
I'm a bitch. I'm a lover. I'm a sinner. I'm a saint. But I am every woman. No, I don't. I think you're all individuals, actually. I think that's been my observation.
Mine too.
Yeah. I don't think that you need to volunteer to be eaten by an archetype.
Well, maybe that's how I ended up being non-binary, as I just was insufficiently invested in getting eaten by the archetype.
Oh boy, now that's a whole different conversation, which we will not be having.
Right. So there's another thing. So one of the things that does really frustrate me about this book is that because I actually really enjoy things that are over-constructed. I actually like it when the author does way too much symbolism and like carefully setting up and then things to resolve later and a lot of like wink wink nudge nudge, don't you see how clever I am? Even that I enjoy. The problem is that she sets all this stuff up and then she just sort of doesn't do anything with it.
Well, yeah, it's a painting. It's an impression. It's chaos. It's a fever dream. It's a literal fever dream because everybody has syphilis.
Right, but I mean, okay. So, for example, it's everybody has syphilis. Syphilis is constantly referred to as the French disease. Presumably, that's why she's translating this fake play from French instead of from Greek.
Right.
Is to like drive home that symbolism, but it doesn't go anywhere. We just we drop the whole French thing. Because she gets distracted. Once we start to get into the primordial Greek chaos part, we don't care about the French part anymore.
Yes. No, that we don't stick with anything except the mother goddess stuff,
Right.
which keeps coming back.
Like the fire
And
stuff needed to come back, but it never
no,
does. And we have two entire tentacle monsters. We have three entire tentacle monsters if you include the Italian courtesan. And we don't do anything with them. She just like shows up and she's like, "Oh hey, it's my sister." And then later she's on the boat and she like goes swimming with her sister, and then her sister like puts her back on the boat. But her sister doesn't do anything. If I discovered that like my long lost family member was actually a beautiful tentacle monster with two children, I would want this to have more of an impact on my life.
I mean, well, the thing is that the book is absolutely fine with treating everything that happens as if it were only a metaphor, which is actually the death of this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Right, because your metaphor's also, like, it's got to work on both levels. If it just works on the metaphorical level, then it's empty.
Right. You have to, your magic in narrative fiction has to exist within the narrative. It cannot, just simply supersede everything. This is true even of magical realism. Everything that happens has a fucking, consequence. Like when we saw Nuka, it's like, this is for realsies. This is going to affect this person's entire life, what has gone down here, despite the fact that it's sort of this, dreamy quality. And
right.
And again, Sylvie just skates by, completely unaffected by everything around her. I also like, so the whole like so we have a couple of different sort of narratives within the narrative here. One of them is the play Apocrypha, and one of them is this book about this Italian courtesan, this Venetian courtesan, incidentally, which is very important because the book also completely and the book also completely fucks up the history of Venice and invents this whole mother goddess worshipping ancient Venetian society that didn't exist. But the point being that the lagoon, in this case rather than rivers, but
little canals.
Well, yeah, but no, the whole. Anyway, I'm gonna put a lagoon. I'm gonna put a banished the lagoon jingle in here.
Excellent.
But there's no actual documentation about the foundation of the city of Venice. But one of the myths they like to tell is that citizens of surrounding Roman towns were wanting to make a better government and a more enlightened society, for which they were banished to the lagoon, as you do. Also, the ancient Veneti people worshipped Apollo. It felt like the sort of the thing with the tentacle monsters and with that, because it was like, there is also kind of a reckoning with our radical feminist foremothers thing happening in this book. Like we're, because her whole business, the whole point of her translation of the Apocrypha is that she has to choose the ending, right?
Right.
And it's like, are all men scum, or is there one good guy? Is Timon in this play an acceptable dude? And she goes with, there is one good guy. And in this, she is at odds with the Venetian courtesan, who is a complete, all men are scum kind of person.
But she's not at odds with the radical feminist foremother who's still there, who has the one good guy in the book, her ancient Egyptian husband.
Yes, but she's still like from the past. She's like immortal, right?
Right.
And she's kind of the incarnation of chaos, the ancient chaos, who is also, who is the primordial feminist, radical feminist in this narrative.
So to some degree, she's reckoning with the courtesan, but the answer that she goes with is the one who's right there, who can advocate and like demonstrate.
Right. But I think that this is, there is some like element of self-critique afoot here. Mm-hmm. It's like like thought went into this, that much is clear. And it's like, but it feels so much like cope to me, It's like, okay, I am writing this in the 21st century. I'm dealing with a failed ideology here. I'm pretending that it's an ancient ideology, even though it's like maybe 100 years old. I am, if that, and I am going to And like I'm still taken on faith that most of the things that this ideology says are true, but I have to explain to you in a way that you can understand without having other people write my story, and because then they might tell the truth. I have to tell you in ways that that we can all understand why actually we're gonna win. The ideology is still good. It's still okay. It's not actually dead. The South will rise again. Separatist lesbian colonies will become a thing. And this and here's how blank can still win.
Yes.
It's just like it's sort of the madness, which is kind of like this fever of somebody digging into an ideology that has no foundation, and just sort of, well, the only thing that I can get out of this is this fever dream, so here it is.
Yeah. And it just... So another thing that annoyed me.
Yes, I've ranted for a while now, please.
No, yes, I was like, nope, you've made your point, actually. That's very effectively, and I agree. But okay, so another thing that annoyed me is that we keep getting told, this is just another thing that gets set up and never delivered on us. We keep getting told how important Sylvie is, but she doesn't do anything important, ever. She's supposed to be the, like, culmination of this, like, tentacle dark chaos goddess breeding project, and that doesn't happen? Like, she just fucks off to California?
I mean, I think that the implication is that it's her children who will be the revolutionists.
But the thing is that initially she's supposed to be the revolutionist.
Yeah.
There's you don't understand how, there's Marina's letter to their dad that's you don't understand how important Sylvie is.
Well, like, there's this, I wrote this down, in fact. There's when she is talking directly, Sylvie does talk directly to Chaos, right?
Yeah.
And Chaos gives her the whole rundown about how women are this and men are this, and, Venus and Mars and women are all goddesses and so forth. And then Sylvie literally says, oh, that explains my significance. She says that out loud.
Yes.
So I think that it's meant to be.
No. You're right. I missed it because I could not believe that this book would try to tell me that this extremely feminist book would try to tell me that the thing that makes this female character so important is literally her womb.
Her void, her cleft.
Her dark subterranean caverns.
Yes. Yeah, no, it's right there. It's in black and white. That's why she's important. It's because she is a female woman.
Who will have female children.
Who will have female woman children.
Oh, see, and that's where her mother failed, is her mother had twins of different genders, but Sylvie...
Exactly.
Sylvie has two girls.
That's exactly it. The real revolution will happen when the two female twins are born, because they won't have this fail son who goes off and dies in a submarine.
Arsonist fail son.
An arsonist fail son.
Arsonist Confederate fail son.
An arsonist patricidal fail son.
So, I also gotta say, I mean, yes, they're definitely lesbians, but the romance just was also kind of it's really unfortunate that there's a much stronger the relationship she has with a man, with the union guy, is so much so much more central to the narrative than the romance that she has with her eventual wife.
It's like, I know that there's a reason. Again, the book explains itself, right? But you have, on the one hand, I liked peeping at her when she was changing clothes, and then when she wasn't around, I spent a while thinking about her, and then I sort of realized that I was probably in love.
Yeah.
We had the kind of sex that causes my clothes to fly off and, me to grow 2 feet and the room to explode in light and him to go down and worship me as a goddess.
Right.
that's a tough one to square, you know. It makes
Right.
me think that the heterosexual sex might have been kind of more of the thing. You
Right.
know?
Even that, so that when she tells, when she tells Hannah, oh, well, once I met you, he didn't stand a chance. But like, that was, she was never going to go with the union guy. Among other things, he's married and has 10 children in Missouri or wherever.
Right.
But, there's basically no chemistry between her and Hannah. And that's very unfortunate because, like, this book continues to be deeply conflicted of the question of, can there be one good man? And the answer seems to be not really, but maybe we should keep men around at least temporarily because having sex with them is, we can have sex with the men and then fall in love with the women.
Yeah. Where have we seen this before? And so on.
Yeah.
And like, there may not be a good man, but there is good dick. Seems to be the...
This very much feels like political lesbianism.
Yeah, it does. Which, it never... It just doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work. It's not really how... Yeah.
You cannot politics your way into sleeping with or not sleeping with anybody, basically. Any class of people. You can definitely politics your way out of individual encounters.
But one of the major warning signs that your political movement may in fact be a cult is when they start telling you who to sleep with and why.
Yeah. Well, this is very upfront about being a cult, though.
Yeah, it is. I'm just saying it doesn't think that that's a bad thing, but most of us are pretty clear on the fact that it is. So yeah, no, you're correct about that. And it's unfortunate, but there it is. Because also we don't get all of their relationship happens off screen, whereas her relationship with the Colonel or whatever he is happens on screen, and so there you go. Also, just in terms of things that annoy me, there's a bunch of stuff about how in addition to women be like this, there's also like humans are the only animals who this, and this, which is just completely untrue.
Right. Right.
Like, there's like humans are the only creatures who form these hierarchies. And it's like, no. Just basic biology, please.
Well, if there's one thing that, turfs are not good at.
The turfs don't like. Yeah, no,
it's the actual facts of biology. And it's funny, you can only, I would not call this one explicitly turf in the way that the time travel Sappho's Bar and Grill was. Sappho's Bar and Grill ends with a diatribe against gender studies as a discipline for replacing women's studies. So this isn't that. But, this goes into the kind of gender essentialism that really that could theoretically, I guess, allow for trans people, but doesn't. And certainly doesn't allow for any kind of gender queerness at all, or, yes, non-binary identities.
There is no transphobia in this text because there are no trans people in this text.
Right.
And even women who spend a lot of their time dressed up as men and being men are not trans or even remotely consent. The idea does not come up.
No, and
there are no trans people in this universe.
And this book is very invested in the physicality of one kind of body being tied to one archetype and the other kind of body being tied to the other archetype, and there's no
the tentacle monster lives in the cleft. There's no way around that. That's basic biological facts. The tentacle monster is in the chasm.
Yes.
Yeah, so like wow, we're almost an hour. I thought I was going to struggle, but in fact, I just got very angry at
Yeah. I'm still going to say thanks for the recommendation because this was certainly interesting.
It sure was. It's both. I'm mostly glad to see that. Well, glad is absolutely the wrong word. I'm grateful that you pointed out to me that things like this are still being written and that they're also being critically acclaimed and given blurbs by people who actually have literary careers. That's distressing to me. And now I know that.
And actually, I feel like to some degree this does come back to Marion Zimmer Bradley because, in the literary world, the Renunciates books that we read for the podcast are very much an, speculative fiction genre internal thing. But The Mists of Avalon, which contains plenty of her fucked up gender ideology, was incredibly influential. And, it was often the one speculative fiction-like thing on a lot of people's bookshelves. And you can really see the Mists of Avalon DNA in this book, which we are not covering the Mists of Avalon because I refuse to read it again. And I don't remember it well enough, but...
Yes, and I'm not going to either.
Good.
So yes. Yeah, no, I don't think that I want to keep talking about this book.
Yeah, that was. I'm glad that you and I both, because we both ended up walking away from this book feeling kind of gross.
Yep, I felt like I needed to take a shower.
Yeah, me too. I felt like I had to go back and reread some completely very different stuff as a palate cleanser after reading this over Shabbos.
And let me just say this, because I spent a lot of time in the previous episode talking about and the previous couple of episodes talking about misandry, and I didn't really talk about it this time because it's fucking there's no point in describing water if you're a fish. This book hates men.
Wrong metaphor. Women or water.
Oh, that's right, and there's a bicycle involved probably also, but. Regardless, I'm not mad about misandry in these books because I'm a man and I don't like people saying bad things about me. I'm mad about it, because it is the soft bigotry of low expectations, and I think it's possible to be a man and to be decent, and these narratives which say that it isn't are bad for men and their development. But also, I would hate to be a woman in this universe.
Right?
This is so... It makes womanhood so awful and inescapable. And it's just not. We're all just human beings. It's so gross.
It really, I do have to say this for the book, is that it really, made me feel grateful that we are living in a time and that you and I exist in a place and in a subculture where you are not beholden to your gender. You can change your gender. You can fail to conform to your gender. You can wrestle with your gender. Whatever. You are not stuck being either, the arsonist or the whore.
Yeah. And this ideology works hand in hand with the conservative ideologies that want to take us back.
Right. No, this very much buys into that. This is very much, if you put women together, they're this destabilizing force.
Yeah, it's the same lie, just told from a different perspective.
And yeah, I am surprised and slightly disheartened that this, can get published and get blurbed and get all of the literary cred in this decade.
Well,
on that cheerful note.
Yeah, on that cheerful note. Next time it's Daughters of
Coral Dawn. Daughters of a Coral Dawn.
Daughters of the Coral Dawn. Yeah, it's that. So it's just going to get worse, but we'll do something nice later.
Yes. Well, in some ways worse, but on the other hand, at least that one has the excuse of being quite old.
Yes, that's from 1984, I think.
Something that. All right. Thanks, guys. And thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this.
Who recommended this. I hope you do not regret it.
Yeah.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
On the night of July 21st, 356 BC, Erostratus, burned to the ground, one of the wonders of the world. The fabulous temple of Artemis, here in the great port of Ephesus. I did it to get famous, to thwart me. The authorities stupidly forbade my name on pain of death ever to be mentioned again. The fools, that was my guarantee of immortality. Some tool in the 21st century, even as we speak, is singing about me. And even in your day, I have many imitators and admirers. My name endures, said Sartre, like a black diamond.